The ocean has always been a place where answers disappear more easily than they are found. For thousands of years, sailors have returned with stories that defied reason. Ghost lights dancing across black water, impossible voices carried through thick fog, and ships that seemed to emerge from nowhere before fading back into the horizon. Most of these stories were dismissed as legends born from exhaustion, fear, or the endless isolation of life at sea. But every so often, a mystery surfaces that refuses to disappear, a case so unsettling that even experienced investigators struggle to explain it. Imagine receiving a distress signal from a cargo ship traveling across an otherwise calm ocean. The signal is brief, distorted, and abruptly cuts off. Rescue teams prepare for the worst, expecting mechanical failure, fire, or severe weather. Yet when they finally reach the vessel, they discover something far more disturbing. The engines are still running. The navigation systems remain active. Lights glow throughout the ship as though the crew simply stepped away for a moment. Fresh coffee sits inside the bridge, still partially warm. Meals remain untouched in the dining hall. Personal belongings are scattered inside cabins exactly where they should be. There are no signs of violence, no evidence of piracy, no indication of a struggle, and no bodies anywhere on board. Every single crew member has vanished without leaving behind a single clue. It sounds like the beginning of a supernatural horror film, yet history has repeatedly shown that abandoned ships drifting across the sea are very real. Some have eventually been explained through accidents or extreme weather, while others remain stubbornly unsolved decades later. This documentary explores one such fictional investigation, inspired by the many unanswered questions that have surrounded real maritime mysteries throughout history. Our story begins with the merchant vessel MV Celestine Star, a modern cargo ship measuring nearly 300 meters in length. Built to withstand the harshest conditions the world's oceans could deliver, she represented the latest achievements in marine engineering. Automated navigation, satellite communication, advanced weather monitoring, redundant power systems, and a seasoned international crew made her one of the safest ships operating on her route. There was no reason to suspect that her routine voyage would become one of the greatest mysteries ever associated with the sea. The Celestine Star departed from a busy commercial port carrying hundreds of containers filled with electronics, industrial equipment, and medical supplies destined for multiple countries. Weather forecasts predicted calm seas for nearly the entire crossing. Engineers confirmed that every critical system had passed inspection. The captain, a veteran mariner with decades of experience, had safely completed the same journey countless times. Crew members contacted their families before departure, joking about long shifts and looking forward to returning home. Security cameras documented loading operations from every angle. Nothing appeared unusual. As the ship disappeared beyond the harbor and into open water, no one suspected that it would soon become the center of a mystery that would captivate investigators around the world. During the first several days, everything unfolded exactly as expected. Automatic position reports arrived on schedule. Engine performance remained stable. Fuel consumption matched predictions almost perfectly. Routine maintenance logs recorded only minor repairs common to any large vessel. The chief engineer submitted detailed reports confirming that every propulsion system operated normally. Satellite weather data continued to show gentle winds and moderate waves. The crew exchanged casual messages with headquarters discussing arrival times, cargo documentation, and maintenance schedules. Every indication suggested an ordinary voyage. Then, without warning, communication patterns began to change. The ship missed a scheduled transmission window by only a few minutes, something that occasionally happened because of satellite congestion. Dispatchers made note of the delay, but saw no immediate cause for concern. A second report arrived later than expected and contained several unusual formatting errors, almost as though someone unfamiliar with the reporting software had entered the information. Although strange, the vessel's location remained consistent with its planned route. Company officials assumed technical issues were responsible. The following day, radio operators attempted to establish voice communication with the bridge. Static dominated the connection. Amid the interference, one operator believed he heard fragmented voices speaking over one another, but the transmission ended before any message could be understood. Engineers checked satellite systems from shore and found no obvious malfunction. Hours later, Another signal reached headquarters. This time it consisted of only a few broken words before dissolving into silence. Some listeners claimed they heard the captain's voice. Others insisted it belonged to someone else entirely. Audio specialists later enhanced the recording repeatedly, but every attempt produced different interpretations. Human perception often finds patterns in random noise, making certainty impossible. Even today, investigators disagree about what, if anything, was actually said. Concern gradually replaced routine confidence. Maritime authorities requested updated satellite imagery of the vessel's projected route. At first, cloud cover prevented clear observation. When a usable image finally became available, analysts confirmed that the Celestine star continued moving at a steady speed without any obvious signs of distress. Her course remained remarkably straight. There were no nearby storms, no collision reports, and no emergency beacons. It was as though the ship had become strangely silent while continuing to navigate itself across thousands of kilometers of open ocean. Then everything changed. An automated emergency transmission suddenly activated without any accompanying explanation. Unlike a traditional distress call manually triggered by a crew member, this signal originated from one of the ship's onboard monitoring systems. It contained no spoken message, no details about fire, flooding, or mechanical failure. Only identification data and the vessel's coordinates before abruptly ending. Maritime rescue coordination centers immediately launched an emergency response. Nearby commercial ships altered course to assist. Aircraft prepared for aerial searches. Rescue crews expected to find visible damage or survivors waiting desperately for help. None of them were prepared for what they would discover. Nearly 12 hours after the emergency alert, the first rescue helicopter spotted the Celestine star. From above, everything appeared almost normal. The ship maintained a slow forward movement across calm water. Navigation lights remained illuminated despite the bright daylight. No smoke rose from the funnels. No lifeboats floated nearby. Most unsettling of all, not a single person stood on deck waving for assistance. Experienced pilots immediately recognized how unnatural the scene looked. Cargo ships are constantly active environments filled with movement. Crew members perform inspections, monitor equipment, maintain cargo, and communicate with approaching aircraft. Yet this enormous vessel seemed completely motionless, as though every human being aboard had simply ceased to exist. Rescue teams cautiously boarded from the stern, expecting hidden dangers. They called out repeatedly while advancing through passageways lined with silent machinery. Their voices echoed unanswered through steel corridors. They entered the bridge expecting injured officers. Instead, they found it was difficult to empty chairs facing. Glowing navigation displays. Radar screens continued sweeping the horizon. The autopilot remained engaged. A half-finished mug of coffee rested beside an open navigation log. Pens lay scattered across a chart table displaying the vessel's planned route. One officer quietly remarked that it looked as though the crew had vanished only moments earlier. Yet as investigators moved deeper into the ship, every new discovery only deepened the mystery rather than explaining it. The first priority was to determine whether anyone remained alive somewhere within the ship. Rescue personnel divided into teams and began a systematic search, starting from the bridge and working downward through 15 towering decks of corridors, machinery spaces, storage compartments, and crew accommodations. Every cabin door was opened. Every maintenance hatch was inspected. Every locked room was forced open. The ship was enormous, containing thousands of square meters of interior space where an injured sailor could easily remain hidden. Yet hour after hour, the search produced the same unsettling result. There was no one. The silence itself became one of the most disturbing discoveries. A modern cargo vessel is never truly quiet. Even with only a small crew, footsteps, conversations, machinery, alarms, and radio chatter create a constant background rhythm. Now only the deep vibration of diesel engines and the low hum of electrical equipment echoed through empty steel passageways. The vessel seemed alive, yet completely abandoned. Investigators quickly realized that whatever had happened had occurred with remarkable speed. Inside the officers' dining room, breakfast remained arranged neatly across several tables. Plates contained partially eaten food that had begun to dry, but showed no signs of deliberate cleanup. Coffee cups rested beside folded newspapers. One chair had been pushed back as though someone had stood up unexpectedly and never returned. In the recreation room, a card game remained unfinished, with playing cards scattered exactly where they had fallen. A laptop still displayed an engineering manual on its screen before its battery had finally died. In one cabin, a crew member's journal lay open beside family photographs, while an unpacked suitcase suggested he had planned to organize his belongings later that evening. Nothing indicated panic. Nothing suggested preparation for abandoning ship. It looked less like an evacuation and more like an ordinary workday that had been interrupted by something impossible. Attention then turned toward the ship's lifeboats. Maritime disasters often leave clues here. If the crew had escaped, the lifeboats would almost certainly be missing. Instead, every enclosed lifeboat remained secured in its launch position. Emergency rafts were still sealed. Life jackets hung neatly inside their lockers. Emergency immersion suits remained untouched. This single observation changed the direction of the investigation. Experienced captains know that abandoning a functioning cargo ship in calm weather is considered an absolute last resort. The open ocean is far more dangerous than remaining aboard a structurally sound vessel. Unless fire, explosion, flooding, or toxic contamination makes survival impossible, crews are trained to stay with their ship. Yet there was no evidence that anyone had even attempted to prepare for evacuation. Engineers descended into the engine room expecting to discover mechanical failure. Instead, they found one of the most meticulously maintained propulsion systems they had ever examined. Temperatures remained within normal operating limits. Fuel systems functioned correctly. Lubrication pressures were stable. Electrical generators supplied uninterrupted power throughout the vessel. Computer diagnostics recorded no catastrophic malfunction before the emergency transmission. Routine maintenance had been performed precisely according to schedule. Spare parts were neatly organized. Tools had been returned to their storage cabinets after use. A technical emergency severe enough to make an entire crew disappear while leaving every critical system operating almost perfectly. The ship's electronic records became the next focus. Modern cargo vessels continuously record navigation data, engine performance, radar information, weather observations, communication logs, and internal alarms. Investigators hoped that somewhere within these digital archives lay the answer. Specialists carefully removed the voyage data recorder, often compared to the black box carried aboard aircraft. Designed to survive extreme accidents, the recorder preserved the final hours before the mystery unfolded. Everyone expected the recovered information to reveal a collision, a fire, or perhaps a desperate conversation on the bridge. Instead, the recordings only generated more questions. For most of the voyage, everything appeared entirely routine. Officers discussed cargo schedules, weather updates, and navigation adjustments with calm professionalism. Radar contacts showed only distant commercial traffic. Weather reports described light winds and moderate seas. Engine performance remained stable. Then, approximately 3 hours before the emergency signal, several unusual events appeared almost simultaneously. One navigation officer reported intermittent interference affecting multiple communication systems. Another crew member mentioned a strange compass fluctuation lasting less than 30 seconds before instruments returned to normal. Engineers noticed a brief voltage irregularity affecting non-essential electrical circuits. None of these events were serious enough individually to justify alarm, but together they formed an unusual pattern. More importantly, no one aboard seemed capable of explaining their cause. The audio recording from the bridge proved even stranger. For nearly 20 minutes, routine conversation continued without concern. Crew members discussed minor course corrections while another officer completed weather documentation. Suddenly, the discussion stopped. Not gradually, but instantly. 1 second several voices could be heard speaking naturally. The next, complete silence filled the recording.